Dr. Stephen, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good pleasure to be with you.
Excellent. Stephen, I've been thinking a lot about this conversation and addiction recovery, the impact on wellness and sleep. And I know so many people in today's modern world are struggling with addiction in some way, whether it's a digital addiction, it's a substance. I'd love to hear it from a medical perspective. What is addiction? Can we start from the very beginning and we can unpack it from there?
Actually, it's interesting when you talk about how many people are suffering with some form of addiction. When you actually look at what we can be addicted to, you sort of think, is there anybody who isn't addicted to a substance or a behavior? And those are the two main categories of addiction are substances, be it drugs, alcohol, food, even caffeine, or behaviors such as, and you mentioned our digital world where we're addicted to our screens. People are addicted to pornography, to gambling, to shopping, to work. There's just so much, and especially with our phones. Oh my goodness, I think I travel as many of us do. You're on the bus, the tube, the train, and there aren't many people who aren't scrolling through their phones. And you think, is that what they really want to be doing? So addiction is. It's not. I wouldn't say it's universal, but it's pretty commonplace. So, what is addiction? Well, addiction is, there are various things that there's various definitions of addiction. There's a psychiatric definition really where several things can be said about somebody, but in particular, it's the persistence in a rewarding behavior. You've got to remember that people are addicted to something because there's a reward, whether it's a substance or whether it's a behavior. It's a persistence despite harm or despite something that's not desirable. That's one of the main features, and there are several other things that we will know about. So yeah, I mean, I can remember one of the pictures that is stick in my mind as a doctor was when I was working. I used to live in Birmingham, and I worked in Worcester hospital, and I would go to work, and invariably there were people sitting outside casualty, clearly suffering the effects of cigarette smoking, often without legs. The peripheral vascular disease had amputations. And then you see people who've got terrible lung conditions, and then they persist in smoking despite that. People who've got severe liver disease, who persist in drinking, and people whose lives so easily get disrupted by whatever it is, their behavior, whether it's gambling, drugs, pornography, whatever it may be, persisting in that despite the fact that it's really impacting their lives in a detrimental way. So that's I think that's one of the best pictures of what an addiction is to me.
I've got some first-hand experience personally, but also with friends and family, and just one story around that, which is my granddad, who passed away a number of years ago when I was much younger. He passed away from cancer, which was caused from cigarette smoke. His dying wish was to have a cigarette before he died the next day. How crazy! Like you're so addicted to the substance that's your dying wish. So where does this come from? Because I think I completely agree with you. I feel like we are living in an addicted society, an addicted modern world, whether it's screens, substances, alcohol, food, shopping, pornography. We've all become addicted to something in some way. And I wonder whether it's us or whether it's the technology giants or it's the food manufacturers, all understanding how to manipulate. I don't know if that's a bit too strong a word, but create.
Totally to manipulate. But actually, you've said two or three things that I wanted to reference. First of all, your dad saying that his dying wish was to have a cigarette. I work at, my main thing is helping people in addiction, and I think it's very helpful for people to consider their addiction as a relationship, um, and very often an abusive relationship. But it's so I when I'm helping somebody to come off alcohol, for example, I'll help them to recognize they've got a relationship with alcohol, and alcohol is a friend. It brings comfort. It's something that it's been a go-to. So whether it's alcohol or any of those things you've mentioned, any of those behaviors, it's something that can comfort us in a time of distress or boredom or pain. And so why do people do it? Because there's something attractive in it, and so it's not surprising that your dad would. So was it your dad or your granddad? I can't remember. You
My
said
granddad, many
your
years ago
granddad,
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
your granddad who would want a cigarette. And then another thing that why? Well, I've just mentioned pain, and I think there are different theories about why people are addicted, and there are various factors that I think when it comes to mental health in general, there are numerous factors for most problems that people have, most issues, and some of them may be genetic and the way that we've been brought up, but more often than not, I strongly believe that addiction is rooted in pain. And it's not just this isn't just my theory. I know that there are plenty of very plenty of great authoritative experts on the subject of addiction who would say that too. And I don't. Are you familiar with Gabor Mate?
Oh, I've seen him on many podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah, so Gabor Mate is very well known, and when I'm teaching about addiction, I like to use video clips, YouTube clips of his, and he argues very strongly that, and I this is my experience too from my own work, that most people who suffer with an addiction, they find that when they really look into it, that their addiction is rooted in pain, and for some people that's not surprising. I think, well, obviously it is, and I think actually when you look at the way behavior goes, you see that so I have people in drug and alcohol clinics and they're doing okay, but then they hit a crisis. Somebody dies, or it's the anniversary of somebody dying, or they get evicted, and then their go-to way of dealing with the stress, the pain, is the thing that they have been addicted to. So I think if anybody's ever going to get free of an addiction, they may need to address particular issues in the here and now. But if it's going to be long-term recovery, they also need to look at why were they taking that substance? Why were they engaged in that behavior in the first place? And there's probably a pain that needs to be addressed. And that's a massive subject in itself, and we can talk for hours about that. But yeah, that I think that's one big why. And of course things are pleasurable, so people, but most people who get engaged, let's talk about substances, who engaged in party drugs and so on, don't necessarily get addicted, but some do. So and then they may not be able to identify something that they're escaping from, maybe a loss or a grief or whatever, or a feeling of inadequacy. But anyway, does that
Perfect. It's a great answer. It's a great answer. Let's talk about the pain piece, because I think that I've listened to Gabor Mate. Is it Mate? That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about the thing that happened in childhood, the pain. It's a psychological pain that's happened in somehow. Maybe it's something that's happening in the younger years or childhood, but it manifests itself into modern day, into physiological pain in some way. Like, maybe you could speak to that a bit, because I think that's why people quite often, that's my understanding of addiction, is normally it's something that's very deep rooted within you, and then you want a level of relief from it. Like, over my years, when I've got engaged with party drugs, alcohol, and chased everything over the years, if I think about it now, I was escaping. That's the main thing was. And when I took drugs, I would feel a level of relief, but I would feel like I feel now, which is high,
Mm-hmm.
pretty happy, calm, content. But I was like, I just feel great. So it's
Mm.
almost like I was correcting something in me which was low from beyond, but that's what these substances were doing. So it is almost like I was
Mm.
coming home, and that's why I feel like people have a real relationship with it. Alcohol was a really
Mm.
hard. I've stopped drinking alcohol now, and but it's like giving up a best friend.
Totally. Yeah.
It's like losing. It took me a few years to stop, but I just because it is like, oh, I'll go home, have a glass of wine. It's like that is
Mm.
like, where's my friend gone? It's really like that. So I've had to do the work on myself over the years as well. So I've had to go through therapy and everything else to understand, well, why did I get so high all
Mm.
those years for so much? Well, so what can you connect that for me? The pain, younger years. What is that's happened somewhere?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that's worth addressing is the whole neurophysiology of what's going on, and I think a lot of us are familiar with the concept of neurotransmitters, and that there are chemicals in our brains that when they're at certain levels we feel better, and there's many people are familiar with dopamine and serotonin, but when we engage in something that's pleasurable, then we get a dopamine hit, and and we feel better. It's a reward. Well, that's basically exactly what's happening when people take antidepressants, and so for many people, the behavior or the substance is their antidepressant, and so it's interesting that you just said that you used substances, you then felt better for that period of time. Sadly, of course, people lose that. They lose the ability to get pleasure from anything other than the substance or the behavior that they're addicted to. And that's one of the sort of tragedies of addiction. But thankfully, in your case, you've put something to one side, and now you're feeling you've got yourself together, and you maybe it's a case of, well, you've got your brain amines, your dopamine, your serotonin levels back to where they should be, and so you don't need those substances. But yeah, it is so often, if people look into it, they will recognize that there is something that has been lacking. And I think it helps me to have compassion for people who are street drinking, street homeless, and I know a lot of people are very find people begging and asking for the next drink and so on. It can be very irritating, and of course it is irritating, but we need to recognize that the most of these people actually have had some severe trauma in their lives, and that is the root of so much addiction.
So when you're working with someone, what's the route to recovery? Because I bet this is a long, very difficult, painful road. Of
Hmm.
course, it's going to be determined based on the level of addiction. But is there a framework, or how do you work with someone to establish more positive habits?
Yeah, I mean that's an enormous an enormous subject. People are at different levels, and we have you may be familiar with the whole cycle of change. One big deal is to work out where somebody actually is in that cycle of change. Are they actually seriously wanting to change? Are they are they simply wanting to get relief from the pain of the addiction? The pain that the substance is causing them because they're having severe withdrawals. They're lurching from withdrawal to intoxication. Or do they really want to deal with the root of it? And so we've got to work out where they are. So some people just want to be stabilized. They're living lives that are a wreck, having to beg or steal or whatever to get money to buy drugs, which then keeps them happy for a while, and then they're going into a drug withdrawal, and they just simply want to be stabilized. And so they want some medication that's going to take away that craving for drugs with the crime and whatever else that may be associated with it. But then there are people who really want to be free, and so then yeah, that's a much bigger journey. And we have what we call PSIs in the clinic, psychosocial interventions, where so people need psychological support, and then there's an enormous amount of support that can be offered, some counselling, some various therapies to look at the thought patterns that are going on. Maybe people need CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Some people need, part of their journey is going to be medication to help with depression and anxiety. But a lot of work needs to be done on dealing with the thought habits, thought patterns. And something that is really important to me, and of course I would say to anybody, is to recognize, and we touched on this in our little chat before we started recording, but our brains are very complex, aren't they? And we have rational brains, and we have a more primitive brain. We have our prefrontal cortex, and we have our limbic system, in particular the amygdala, the part of the brain that deals with the instant management of stress. And so often, so much mental health is perpetuated by the fact that we're dealing with situations, we're dealing with the crisis that we're in with our primitive brain, with our limbic system. Now, that's not to say that we don't need our limbic system. It's a very important part of who we are, rather than using our prefrontal cortex, our rational brain. So one of the things that we want to do is help people to rationalize their situation, and that takes a lot of work, so that they're not dealing with their stuff, their issues, whilst they're in a state of stress, helping people out of stress into a place where they can really process the emotional conflicts that are going on.
So is that what I've heard before about when they talk about the fight or flight
Totally.
scenario? Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So when you use the word primitive, it sounds like, we that's something I want to leave behind. And the answer is no, we do not. So the fight or flight, it's the stress response. And the stress response is vital. It keeps us alive. And if you're in the countryside, crossing a field, and suddenly you realize there's a bull coming towards you, you need your fight or flight response. You need your stress response that's going to release adrenaline and cortisol, which is going to give you the capacity to either run from the bull and jump over the fence, or if it's something that's less threatening than the bull, to fight. So you fight, and you need that. So that's it's the so-called primitive brain, or some people are familiar with the so-called chimp paradox. I can't remember the name of the author, is Steve somebody. We can think of our two brains, our human brain, prefrontal, or our chimp brain, and it's our chimp brain that manages the stressful situations. And so we do need that. But what so often happens with so much mental health is that we're dealing with our current thoughts when there is no imminent danger, but we're dealing with it with our primitive brain, our chimp brain, our limbic system, whatever you want to call it. And so we're in panic mode, we're in stress mode, we're in fight or flight mode, when really we could be, there's no imminent danger. Now we need help in coming to that place where we can rationalize our thinking and deal with it with our human brain, if you like, rather than our chimp brain, if that makes sense. But it's a massive job.
When I went on my journey, and I was actually suffering, it's a number of years ago, I was suffering with depression, and I just felt very stressed all the time. And when I went to therapy, well, that's one of the first things that they were able to share with me. And I said, I used the words, I said, I just feel like I'm in fight or flight all the time. Like there's no reason for me to be stressed. There's none, but I can't get out of this. Like, why do I feel like this all the time? And I think it was actually because I've been in sales for nearly 2 decades, always working towards targets, late nights,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff, along with my past behaviours. So it took me a number of years to understand, one, what was happening, and two, I had no ideas there was two different parts of the brain. And it was, I suppose that, fast forward to now, where I don't suffer the same challenges, is because I've learned those some routines, like training in the gym, like walking every day, like meditation, which puts you
Yeah.
into is it the prefrontal cortex? I'm going to butcher
Cortex.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it
Well,
puts you into that part of the brain. So
mm,
therefore, you just feel better. You feel lighter. You're like,
totally.
okay, this is great.
Yeah. We all have what clinical psychologists refer to as automatic thoughts. I mean, it's people I've heard how many tens of thousands of thoughts we have a day. We do all the time. We just our minds are busy with thoughts, and so many of them are automatic. They're not ones that we've chosen to have, and very often those automatic thoughts come from situation. For you it may be sales, whatever, or stressful situations, or beliefs that we've got about ourselves and our lives that have been fashioned by our upbringing. And if those automatic thoughts are negative, then and stressful, our heart's going to be pumping, and our stomach's going to be cramping, and we're going to be in fight or flight mode. So yeah, and you mentioned various things. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing for our mental well-being, and activity is absolutely one of them. And you mentioned meditation, and so that's been an absolute game changer for me. I love promoting mindful meditation, because it's a way of just recognizing I'm having this thought about this person that bullied me, abused me, whatever it may be, and just saying, well, I recognize I'm having that thought, but I'm actually going to let that thought move on, and I'm going to choose, most commonly, to focus on my breath. And it's that process of disengaging from that negative automatic thought and focusing on something that's neutral. And that's one way of doing it, and that's mindfulness-based stress reduction. And you can add to that cognitive behavioral therapy, where you recognize a thought, but you also recognize this with your rational brain, with your prefrontal cortex, that actually that's not the whole truth. And so the negative thought that's causing so much stress can be countered by, most of us can find some positive things to think about. And that's really another big part of how we can diffuse the situation.
What you're sharing is that once you're aware, so I think awareness is that first step of awareness, actually, that you can command your mind in a certain way. How much control do we actually have over this? It sounds like, from what you're saying and from what I've now experienced, is that we do have control, some level of control, to be able to put us into a different state, to then to improve our well-being and not have maybe the addictive cycles, but it takes time and awareness. So do you feel that I think what you're saying is that we can be in control.
Now there's so much to talk about, isn't there? That's another really massive subject. So something that's really a fairly relatively recent therapy, but it's actually ancient wisdom, is something called acceptance and commitment therapy, and something that I absolutely love. And I've massively benefited from acceptance and commitment therapy for myself, especially with learning to sleep better. But acceptance is accepting the things that you cannot control. So that's a really interesting question. How much control do we have? Well, we have some control of some things, but there are a lot of things we have no control over. And if we're trying to control the things that we can't control, we're going to be really stressed. I mean, I don't know if it's coming through the microphone. I can hear a dog barking in the background. I don't know if it's coming through. I can't. I could stop it, but I can't control that dog barking. But I can accept it. What I can do, what I do have control over, is whether or not I'm going to react badly to that dog barking. And if we can learn to accept the things we can't control, and I love the 12 steps as part of people's recovery journey. And it's, many people are familiar with the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which are used across the board with various addictions. And if anybody's been to a 12 steps meeting, they will have prayed as part of the process through what's known as the serenity prayer. And it's, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the things I cannot control. The courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Oh my goodness, that's such a massive piece of wisdom for people with perhaps most mental health conditions. To accept the things I cannot change or control. I can't change what happened to me 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I can't change that. I can't change all sorts of things that may be causing me a lot of stress. And if I can accept that I can't change those things, but take some steps, have the courage to take the steps that I can control. So I can choose not to dwell in the past or worry about the future. And I can choose to focus on my breath. I can choose to be grateful. I can choose to forgive. I can choose to do all sorts of things that are going to bring me mental relief. And that's wisdom, and it's life-changing.
I absolutely love that. I absolutely love that, because what you're saying is that the power is within you, regardless of what's happened to you in the past. The power is within you. So I think it's that awareness step, and then the ability for you to decide how you're going to respond to the thing or the things that have happened to you. I think that's really powerful.
Oh, it is. You say it's powerful. It's life-changing. and I just see so many people just living in that place of anguish, when what they're doing so often, and I've been there and you've been there, we've all been there, is we're fighting against the things that we cannot change. And then the peace and the freedom that comes from thinking, well, I can't change that. I can't, but there are things I can do, and I'm going to do those things. And that often takes great courage, massive courage, and determination.
There's
And
there's a book that I'm listening to and reading at the moment, which is called The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. It's a new book. It's just been released. And the point of let them, and I really love this, and I've really loved listening to it so far, is about letting them be them. And she just said, and really it's about not controlling the outcome, or not taking anything personally from, it could be your boss at work, it could be a family member who says something, and then she goes into a lot of detail around all the different scenarios. And every day there could be something said negative about you by somebody, or someone does something that you don't like. I was in the office with like 100 people yesterday. There was loads of things happening all the time. And at any point, the old Simon could have taken a great offense to a lot of those things. But the new Simon is just, it's okay, let them. And we and the level of how quick you can respond to it, whereas the old Simon would have been often a weekend spender, probably because of a lot of things that were said. But now it's like, okay, you're not giving in. It's empowerment of just let them. We'll move on.
Brilliant. It's absolutely, and I think that overlaps very much with what we've been talking about. But something else that you have said that I think is incredibly valuable and powerful is not taking offense. And alongside that, I one thing that I love, and I run a recovery program, and a big part of the recovery program is forgiveness, which is sort of the opposite of being bitter or being offended. We can take offense, or we can let them, and a big part of letting them is just letting it go. It doesn't mean that what they've done is okay, but not holding on to things. And again, this is a massive subject, and people can misinterpret what I'm saying. We don't just forgive anybody for anything and everything. No, but sometimes we just need to let things go, which is what you were saying. Massively powerful.
Well, I remember when I did some therapy a number of years ago, and then my therapist said, there was a subject I'd like us to work on. And I said, no, I'm not ready to look at that yet. I said, I'm not ready to forgive that person yet. And my therapist said, it's not about them. It's about you. I said, what do you mean? I said, what do you mean? She said, because you're still holding on to it. That person's probably forgotten, or even has got no idea. It happened 20 years ago, Simon. She said, it's about letting you move on. I said, oh, okay.
Massive.
It's a really good point. Let's do the work, because I do want to move on. So I love that, because it's the let them is that, but you also have to then go, no, I deserve to be free. I deserve to be able to move on. So I think I love kind of how this is all aligning.
Yeah. What I often hear in the clinics, and I don't know if I've even used this expression myself, but I know I've used expressions that are similar. We have people that are suffering pain, torment, anguish for things that have happened. And what we can say to the person is that you as the patient, client, whatever, you're letting your abuser live rent free in your head. And as you say, they've forgotten, they've moved on. They may not even be alive, but you're holding on to something. And I think what a lot of people say when they're struggling with a forgiveness issue is, I cannot let that person off the hook. But actually, what you can do is you can let them off your hook. That you're hooking yourself to somebody that has hurt you in whatever way, and just let them off your hook. It may well be that some bad things happen, and then there needs to be consequences. I mean, I know of somebody, and I know her, who suffered terrible abuse at the hands of her father, and it was, and she actually testified against him to the police, but she forgave him. And she is free. She's free of an enormous amount of torment that she suffered. That torment has now absolutely gone, because she's forgiven her father, even though she did testify against him. So yeah, big subject.
It really is. It really is. When someone's on the road to recovery and they're trying to improve their brain health, I think, and the prefrontal cortex, which we're talking about, what are the kind of steps that, along with all the support and the therapy, psychotherapy, all those types of things, you talked about CBT, but what are the mental wellness steps that people can take to improve their lives?
Yeah, the NHS, I don't hear it being promoted so much now, but in particular with a relation to mental health, the NHS were promoting 5 ways to well-being. We've touched on some of these already, and I think there are more than 5. I think there are several more, and so what we've been discussing are some actual sort of therapies, some psychological approaches that we can have for mental well-being. But there are various other things. We're very complex beings, aren't we? And you mentioned going to the gym, and there's all sorts of things we can be doing. So I'll mention quickly mention those 5 steps to well-being. And I think of the acronym CLANG, CLANG. So C is being connected. A lot of people are suffering a lot of mental anguish, and they're cutting themselves off from friends, relatives. And if we can foster good connections with people, that's gonna be an antidepressant. We're gonna boost our dopamine levels by going to the gym, can be, or going playing. I play chess. What somebody going to play tennis with somebody, whatever it is, maybe going to church, connecting with friends and family, connection. L is learning, choosing to be active with your mind. Maybe it's playing Scrabble, maybe it's reading, researching. A is activity. You have mentioned going to the gym, and massively important for our physical well-being, but being active, and that's again another antidepressant. N is noticing. Now that's just being aware of the present rather than being stuck in the past with regrets, or being worried about the future, and that brings in the whole area of mindfulness. And then G is giving. There's so much benefit for our mental well-being if we're giving back. And so we talk about recovery. One of the ways in which people maintain their recovery is by giving back to those, is by helping people. Some people go to their recovery groups because they need it for themselves, and then when they've got to their place of recovery, they will go because they want to help other people. And it's a two-way street, because they are going to benefit from giving. So there's numerous things, but I also think I would add several other things to that. I would say having a good rhythm of rest, having times when you're not, particularly before you go to bed, where you're switching off your phones and minimizing screen time, and also you're practicing things like gratitude, massively helpful for our mental health, forgiveness. So yeah, many things, but that's a good acronym. Think of CLANG, and those are good 5 first steps for good mental well-being.
I'm going to pick up on the first one, and let's just have a conversation about it, which is connection. Because I don't know, Joanna Hari, I think it's Joanna Hari. I read his book many years ago, Lost Connections, and he did had a conversation on a TED Talk about it, many millions of views, and he was talking about the link between addiction and connection, and he said,
absolutely,
and he was making a point around addiction wants you to be isolated, and the opposite to that is connection, which it wants you to be with people, with the family, with the community, with groups of people. I'd be interested in your take on that. And because I can remember, certainly when I was drinking, it kind of like, I knew when to stop when I was sneaking drinks and I was drinking on my own. And I was like, this isn't a good behavior. This isn't going to anywhere good. And I knew when I could hear the voice inside me, I was like, but this is isolating me. So quite quickly after that, I stopped. And so what's the connection? Well, what's the link there between addiction and connection? And was what Joanna Hari said, was that correct in terms of?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't know whether I've seen that. I don't remember that name. Was that was it a he, Johanna? Yes,
Joanna
Hari.
Yeah.
So was he talking about Rat Park?
Yes, he was. No, it was Rat Park. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So what's the connection? I think it's massive. And some people describe connection as the opposite of addiction. Now, what I think I'm guessing that I heard the same talk, and I'm thinking, yes, this is really important, but it's not the be all and end all. But Rat Park, as you know, is this experiment where rats in community have the option of drinking water that's ordinary, or drinking water with cocaine. I think it was cocaine. And what happened is that those rats who were living in community didn't get addicted to the cocaine, whereas those who were isolated did. And so there's this, so in rats, there's this massive correlation between connection and freedom from an addictive substance, whereas isolation was the opposite. So connection, massive. Yeah. So if anybody's listening to this and you're feeling isolated, you're feeling like your mental health's not good, well, there's probably several things that you need to do, but one of them is get connected. Pick up the phone, write a text, and actually let's have real proper connection rather than Facebook or Instagram or whatever. Let's have face to face when possible, real connection, because it's very therapeutic. And I run a charity where we help people with it's called the Keys Project. And there are 3 keys that we work on, and the first one is connection, is community. Build community, get into, and that's one of the great values of recovery groups for people who are who are struggling with addiction, is meet up with other people who are on that same journey, because connection is so therapeutic.
Got you. And what else? So we talked about CLANG, so some of the things that people can do if they are struggling with a substance or a device or something on those lines, and they're looking to sort of self-help and find ways out of that. I think one of the big things that changed for me, certainly last year and previous years, is when I started prioritizing sleep. I'm interested to see this because it's probably, when I think back for the last few years on the health and wellness journey that I've been on, the more I meditated and I
Mm-hmm.
walked, the calmer I became, the less I wanted to drink alcohol, the more my sleep improved, and the more my next day got better. So when I wrote my book, which kind of explained what that loop was, I'd been about 6 months with no sugar, no alcohol, all healthy, real foods, sleeping well, the 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep a night, but then feeling amazing the next day. And I got to about
Mm.
4 or 5 months in, and I started jotting down notes for the book without intending to. I was just like, I feel amazing. Like
Lovely.
I want people to know all about this. Why don't people know
Mm.
about this? Um,
Yeah,
so what's the impact of sleep there on that journey? Why was that so important? So I feel like that was the anchor.
absolutely. Yeah, no, sleep is so important. I mean, I describe sleep and mental health as a two-way street, because sleep is so beneficial for good mental health. Mental health is so beneficial for good sleep, and they go together so well. So we absolutely need to prioritize our sleep, and um, and there are so many benefits. I mean, sleep is amazing. It's amazing for our mental health and for our physical health as well. So very often people who are suffering with just poor mental health, whether it's addiction or not, are sleeping badly so often because they're perpetuating behaviors that are perpetuating the poor sleep, which then in turn keeps them on this vicious cycle that you've described. And so often, as I mentioned, it's not simply CLANG. It's not think there are things in addition. So resting, actually, really prioritizing rest. So I have a phrase that I help people with sleep, and I call my program the fight for the night. And the full expression of it is the fight for the night is fought in the day, and we need to prioritize we need to do things in the day that are going to help us to sleep well at night. But massively, we've got to make it a priority for so many reasons, not least our mental health.
What are I don't know how far you can share of like what is the guidance for the things during the day, like what's sleep hygiene, is there best practice?
Mm. Yeah, when I was at medical school, it's interesting. I now realize how incredibly important sleep is for for life, and it fascinates me how badly taught sleep is at medical school, and how little many doctors think about it, and how little value they put on their patients sleeping well. So just from a physical point of view, I mean, there's so many stats I could throw at you, but there's people's lives are shortened by not sleeping. If you sleep less than 5 hours at night on a regular basis, I don't want to frighten people here, but because you can do something about it, you're actually 15% more likely to die from all causes. If you're sleeping consistently less than 6 hours at night, you are 30% more likely to have cardiovascular disease or diabetes. And actually, a lot of people are massively upset about their weight, and one of the best ways of losing weight is actually to sleep well. People who consistently sleep more than 7 or 8 hours sleep, I think they're sort of 50% less likely to be obese. So, so where was I going with this? We're just talking about, well, am I answering your question? It was
No,
just,
we're talking about the
we need to.
sleep,
Oh,
the
sleep
problem.
hygiene. Yeah. So sorry. So what I was going to say is when I was at medical school, which was a long time ago, all we were taught about insomnia was prioritize sleep hygiene. So there's a lot of things we could talk about, and I'd be happy to, but it was talked about some of them already, and that's exercise, but the right time of day. By all means, enjoy your coffee, but have your coffee in the morning. Switch off your screens in the evening. So when I talk about sleep, I like to talk about three categories. In fact, you could narrow them down to two, but there's one category one approach that I think is so important. There's a priority in itself. And the first one is sleep hygiene. So there's a list of things we could do. You know, we can get some morning daylight to kickstart our circadian rhythms. We can, I mentioned coffee, not eat food too late, have a good sleep environment, have our bedroom, you know, that's associated with maybe just sleep and intimacy, rather than scrolling through your Facebook and watching TV and work emails, because we are very easily conditioned. We're programmed, and if we program ourselves to work in our bedrooms, then we're not going to sleep so well. So the sleep hygiene, and then the second one is rhythm. Having a good rhythm, having a good routine, having a routine of rest, having a day off in the week when you don't actually work, ideally when you can minimize your screen time. And then the third thing, which is massive, is working on your mindset, working on your having a good sleep mindset, and meditation, for me and for many people, can be a game changer in that respect. So that's why, you know, you need to be doing things during the day that are gonna reap benefits at nighttime. But definitely, anybody listening to this, prioritize your sleep because it's gonna help you in so many ways.
So it's interesting what you've been, it's so interesting, fascinating what you've been talking about. And I'm also thinking about, you mentioned fat loss, or people needing to, or wishing to lose some weight. I saw some stats recently saying by 10 years time, 2035, that there's an expectation that 50% of the global population will be overweight or obese.
Yeah.
And I wonder
Scary.
how much of that is from these hyperpalatable foods, probably very, but I wonder if there's a hidden issue, which is just people aren't getting the level of sleep that they need, which then starts to regulate people's bodies.
For sure.
Or does it then goes into the things we started talking about quickly, which is that a lot of foods we're eating today are addictive. So, you know, how many times have you had just one chocolate or just one Pringle?
Oh,
Never.
oh,
You know,
no.
people don't realize that on a very basic level, these foods are addictive. Sugar is addictive. You never eat one chocolate. You eat the whole lot most of the time.
Totally.
So
Tell me about it.
it's almost like people have ended up in a cycle, which is poor sleep. They go to bed late because of their Netflix and chill, or they're playing video games to very late. They come up in a stressed way, quickly to work or quickly online. And then maybe the breakfast or the lunch has got high sugar.
Yeah.
You know, I can just see this loop that so many people must be living in.
Yeah.
Whether they're aware or unaware, or they just can't escape this loop. Because it's food, then it's addiction, and then maybe there's some alcohol, and I'm not sleeping well, so I'm going to have a few drinks, not realizing the unbelievably bad effects alcohol has on sleep. That's one of the big things I noticed. God, if you wear a Whoop,
Definitely.
God, you'll find out about it pretty quickly. You'll go from I'm doing great to like no, your heart rate variability is, you know, in a really bad place. All of these things like loop together and they compound. And I wonder whether this world issue that we're having around people being overweight or obese is actually fundamentally is because people aren't sleeping well at a really foundational level. I'd be interested in your view.
Yeah, well, I would say all the above, actually. You know, actually, when we were talking about addiction earlier on, we were sort of saying, why are people addicted? And you referenced phone. Well, let's bear in mind that we're talking about things for which there are phenomenal markets, aren't there? So the digital marketplace is incalculable. How many, you know, billions, trillions of pounds, dollars, whatever. And so we've got people who are crafting devices that are very skillfully designed to steal our time. And I don't think the food industry is any better. I mean, you know, I just love Mars bars, and they're carefully, they're very skillfully designed. To be honest, you know, I haven't had a Mars bar for a long time. Which is just because I just know that but the thing is they're skillfully designed to make you want more. So you buy a twin pack.
There are teams of people, very highly educated scientists that are figuring out what food makes you want more of it and how quickly you eat it. They do tests. So, for
Mm.
example, in the book Ultra Processed People, they talk about, and there's a children's breakfast cereal called Crave. Crave.
Wow.
I mean, how can that be possible? But it's a children's breakfast cereal
Mm.
and it's called Crave, and it's because kids crave it. It's full of sugar,
And its number one ingredient is yeah, and then you
and
just look at the ingredient. It's number one sugar.
and
Oh.
it's shocking, and that's how we're feeding people. And so it's just, I think this is when I think a lot about addiction, and I wrote about it in the book. And the reason why is that I don't think people realize how addicted a lot of these foods are, and then it
Mm.
creates an addictive cycle. What I noticed once I was like, I'm going to have a real break from all of these things. I found real peace, harmony, calm. I was calm, clear, and consistent once I'd broken free from it, because I think you need to go for like at least over a month. But I
Mm.
noticed it around 3 or 4 months where I was like, I don't crave anything anymore. I just feel calm. I was like, how lovely does this is great. Why does nobody know? And I think this is the problem. This is the world that we're in, which is social media is addictive.
Mm.
You know, the food is addictive, alcohol is addictive, all of these things, all the
Mm.
substances and the devices, they're all addictive. And that's the things. We have these incredibly intelligent people funded by billions of
Mm.
research, which can then create this cycle for us. It's almost impossible for us to escape it.
It is, yeah, and you have to be very intentional.
I think that's the
Um,
thing, isn't it? It's about living an intentional life and trying to,
mm.
it's the awareness and waking up from it all.
Yeah, it certainly is, and yeah, I think we have to recognize that we're in a battlefield, and we've got enemies, if you like, who are very skillful at taking us where we don't want to be. And so we have to really be determined and courageous if we're going to be the people and live the lives we want to be. But that can sound scary, but it is actually very attainable. It's not actually that difficult when you actually put your mind to it. But it does it takes intentionality, doesn't it? It takes, you know, I've got to say it right. You know, I'm not going to do whatever it is, and I'm I'm not going to look at my phone after such and such a time. I'm not going to eat sugar or drink whatever. You've got to be very intentional and very disciplined and persistent.
The interesting thing is, what I'll share, because I've been on this journey as well, is that once you've been doing it for a few months, it's not disciplined. It doesn't feel disciplined anymore. It just feels
Mm.
natural and pretty
Yeah.
normal. So you're not trying anymore, but you do have to
Mm.
try hard at the very beginning. So I've got friends who are trying to reduce or give up alcohol, and some of them will get to a couple of weeks or a month, and they feel like the craving is getting stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I always say to them is that you've just got to keep going, because it will calm. And then you need to find like self-care routines like walking or journaling or something just to help to calm it down.
Definitely. Well, we have, you know, I'm not a neuroscientist, but we have neural pathways. We have patterns of thought that I mentioned. They're automatic and they're reflex, and you can have a breakthrough in an area in your thinking, and think, right, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to think this, and then you think, great. But actually, if you've had a pattern of thought that's gone on for decades, maybe it's a reflex that's you're just going to go straight back into it, especially when you're next hitting a bit of stress. And so we need to take time to develop new neural pathways. And the picture I like is of a, you picture a field that has had a car driving a wet, you know, a field that's been wet, and this Land Rover has driven across it every day for months, and then it hardens, and you've got these ruts, and it's actually very difficult not to drive in those same ruts. But when we persist in a disciplined way to think differently, maybe behave differently, and this is what CBT is, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's sort of like soft rain is the picture, where the rain is just slowly softening the mud, the whatever, and then it becomes possible to develop new routes, new ways of thinking, new driveways, which is what you've described. You've then come to that place where, yeah, I'm not automatically driven into the craving for that fix of whatever it is, whether it's a behavior or a substance. So it takes time, but once you've got to a place, then yeah, things can be a lot better. We've all got to be on our guard, haven't we? Especially when we've remembered ways that we've found comfort in the past.
I think that's the challenge. It's the habits from
Mm-hmm.
years gone by. I still struggle at 5 o'clock every day, because that's when we used to go and grab a glass of wine. Let's have a glass of wine and sit
Mm-hmm.
down and just relax, let's chat. So at 5 o'clock every day, I have to be distracted, just so I don't,
Mm-hmm.
just so I don't remember. Now I go to the gym and I'll lift up some weights or something, but it's just a way of distracting me to pass on that moment. Sometimes I completely forget about it now because it's been so long. But like I have to be intentional. At the very beginning, I had to be very intentional about that time, because it's like I just have a reaction. Let's go to a glass of wine. Let's do this. We don't do that anymore. There's going to be
Mm-hmm.
a new. There's going
Yeah,
to be something new. I just wanted to finish
absolutely.
up on talking about sleep. So I think it's a really important point. And I
Mm.
know you've recently put together a course. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
you could share kind of the reason behind that course, how people, what's in the course, how people can access it, and what's it about? What's the benefit going to be?
Okay, yeah. Well, I've got a course, and I've alluded to the title, "A Fight for the Night." And what I should say is, I'm somebody who has suffered enormously with insomnia. I have I've been on a long journey. I blame being a junior doctor. I think it's in the days when I was working really really long hours, and that's quite a long time ago. But I used to sort of panic about not getting enough sleep. So having had a long journey of poor sleep myself, and then having also been in the situation where I'm helping people clinically with sleep, and I would say in the past I haven't done it very well because I haven't really understood the issues. But more recently, I've really learned some powerful tools to sleep better, and when we've talked about them. But I like to say that the icing on the cake is developing a new mindset. So I've developed a course, and I call it "The Fight for the Night," and it's an online course that has a number of modules. Definitely makes a lot of makes good use of the benefits of meditation, mindful meditation, but also we have a virtual CBT session, sort of to develop some new affirmations, some thoughts that we can intentionally practice. And yeah, and I'm delighted to say I've got some great feedback for it, so I can unashamedly promote it. Yeah.
So for example, so my dad really suffers with insomnia. So I'm immediately
Mm,
thinking I'd love to introduce him to this. Like, so with someone who is struggling with insomnia, and I've given him lots of advice and guidance in the past, some of it's just like
mm.
basic stuff like reduce caffeine in the evenings. I know he's a heavy tea drinker. What do you think is going to, once he's done the course, what do you think is going to change for him? And what are the things that he needs to start thinking about doing? You mentioned meditation then.
Mm,
I'm a huge advocate for meditation. I'd love to see my dad
mm,
meditate. But I think, what do you think? Because right now he wakes up 3 or 4 times a night, if he can even get to sleep. So like I
mhm,
imagine that there will be people, whether it's a parent or people even in high stress roles. I'm a new dad, I'm a new parent, so like,
mm.
I'm up regularly as well, but that's very very specific situation. How will it take someone on the journey to improve their sleep?
Yeah, well, I'd love your dad to try the course, and let's talk about that later. But so we address those three areas that I talk about. So developing good sleep hygiene, and I was just recently talking to somebody who was struggling with sleep, but he was drinking coffee at 7 or 8 in the evening, and I said, well, there's some really simple things you can do to improve your sleep drive. So we address sleep hygiene, and then we really prioritize the rhythm, healthy rhythms, lifestyle rhythms, consistent rhythms, and then work on developing a new mental developing new mental neural pathways. But the big deal is we have it in this course. We have a 28-day challenge where I get people to journal their sleep for 28 days, I would encourage your father to commit. Okay, you say sleep's been a problem for decades. Why don't we just commit to a 28-day trial where we practice gratitude, where we do some positive thinking, where we do some meditation, and in the course I have some specific sleep meditations. These aren't meditations to get you sleepy. It's just really important. A lot of people think, right, I'm gonna meditate so I can relax and I can fall off. No, that's not how it works. You meditate so that you learn to disengage from your stressful thoughts during the night, and yeah, and then just keep at it. One picture that I think is really helpful for a lot of situations is to think that you. So often, what happens is people have a bit of relief, and then they relax, and then they think, "Oh, I'm okay." Imagine you're on a river with on a paddle boat, and everything in front of you is lovely. The birds are singing, the sky is blue, the trees are green, and you're gently paddling, and everything's good. But if you stop paddling, you will drift back, and there's a waterfall behind you, and so that is, I think that's a really good picture for life. That yeah, if we want to maintain that place where things are okay, we need to keep paddling, and that doesn't mean it's not stressful, it's not unpleasant, but it certainly applies for me, for people that I've supported with insomnia. Is you, rather than just getting to that place where you had a good night's sleep and you think, okay, everything's great, you need to persist in these practices of being still, resting during the day, doing mindfulness. Now, a lot of people think mindfulness, that's freaky, that's weird, I don't want to do that. Actually, and they think, oh, I think I can't. What I try and help people to realize is that it's actually not that complicated. It's not about shutting your mind down. It's a matter of just being aware of what's going on in your mind more than anything. So yeah, it's a collection of practices which, when you bring them together, are very powerful.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to share this with my dad as well. So I think we're going to share a discount code. So if anyone's sort of listened to this or they kind of follow, then they can have some sort of discount that goes with that. So hopefully we'll be able to share that link as part of the notes along with this episode.
Absolutely. No, I'd be delighted. And actually, okay, whilst we're plugging the course, it's called The Fight for the Night, and I can just mention it's the Fight for the Night. No, sorry, not the fightforthenight.com. Sorry, my mind's just gone. What was I going to say?
We're talking about the website. Fight for the Night. Yeah.
Oh, it's, you know how it is. You're about to say something, and your mind went anyway. So fightfornight.com.
We'll show everything in there. Share everything as part of the show notes. So it sounds
sure.
like fightforthenight.com, and there'll be some sort of discount code or something that I can share as well. So
absolutely,
people will be able to benefit from that. If you're struggling with insomnia, struggling with sleep, I'm certainly going to encourage my dad to have a go. He's been trying everything for a decade. So if this works, I'd be so happy to have actually helped him.
Yeah, me too.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk through addiction. I think if anyone is struggling, then, I think the first step, it sounds like it's connection. It's talking to someone.
Yes. I'll just quickly throw in something that a website that I've helped build, and it's called addictionsupport.online. So if anybody is suffering with addiction, whether it's substance or behavioral issue, there you can just find whether it's NHS clinics, recovery groups. The important thing is there's so much help out there. Get the help you need, because yeah, we all need it.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Simon.